is Titan Talk! Welcome, everybody. Today is June the 9th, and this is episode 7 of Titan Talk. My name is Kimber, and I'll be breaking down all the latest on the newest episode of Attack on Titan, just in time for the next episode to come out tomorrow. We're going to go into the plot, character developments, my favorite quote, and any and all new Titan developments that we were introduced to in this episode. I'll also go into my predictions for the next episode coming out tomorrow, and talk about some other news in the Attack on Titan media world. And if you've been listening to this show up until now, you will have heard that there wasn't a whole lot going on in the Titan media world, but I have a couple new things to talk about on that topic, so stay tuned for that. I don't own any of the storylines, characters, or events in the Attack on Titan world, nor do I own any of the rights pertaining to the show. Okay, let's do this! So this was chapter 35, and it was called Children. We got a taste of why it's called that, and we'll talk about that later on. My only thoughts for what was going to happen in this episode was that we would see the battle between the Scouts and the Armored and Colossal Titan, and my prediction was that Ymir was going to betray Bert and Ernie in this episode, which she kind of does. A little ambiguous. We'll get to that. First off, we visit the village of Ragako. I really hope I'm pronouncing these words correctly. Led by a Mr. Mr. M, sure, on Hanji's request. We see in this town that the horses are still in their stables, but there are no people there, which they point out is kind of weird. They come across the Titan that we had seen before, the female Titan who can't get up. She is laying on top of this destroyed house and cannot get up. Has this weird smile on her face. They also happen to have a picture of Connie's family on their person to compare. We see that the Titan is still very much alive. It starts to move, but it can't actually get up or do any damage. Also, Hanji mentioned that they had captured this Titan, but it looks like they just left it. It didn't look very captured to me. It's just kind of helpless, more or less. So after we look at that, we go back to the forest of giant trees, and we never go back to this village in the rest of the episode, so that is probably going to be talked about in a later episode. So now we're back in the forest of giant trees, and we are at the moment where Ymir vaguely sides with Bert and Ernie. Then we see, okay, the Scouts are coming in, they're getting close, then we move forward from there. Rainer thinks he has Ymir figured out at this point. He basically states to Bert that Ymir only cares about herself and Christa, or Historia. Also, I thought this was weird. Rainer knows about Historia's real identity, her royal connections, etc., but still calls her Christa. I thought that was weird. Why aren't they calling her by her real name? Why do they insist on calling her Christa, even up to now? How long has she been Historia? A couple episodes at least. And Rainer knows that that's not her real name. Still calls her Christa. Weird. Also, why did Rainer have to bring up that Bert has a thing for Annie at a time like this? I thought that was very poorly timed. I feel like they've been doing a lot of subtle plot points that are just sprinkled in there, but they are probably going to be important. Also, and I don't need to go into character development to point this out, Eren sucks at pretending he's not going to fight, by the way. And he also kind of sucks at fighting because Rainer just instantly takes him down. We see Eren pretending to be hurt too badly to attack, and then he attacks, and then Rainer immediately tackles him and ties him up. So there's that. And I think that's kind of why Ymir sided with Bert and Ernie at the beginning of the episode, at the end of the last episode as well. It's the same clip, but still. I think, yeah, she wanted to avoid that. Then once Eren is basically passing out from lack of oxygen, we hear a short conversation between Bert and Ymir, and there are some feelings there. that are coming out. She's putting up her wall. She's pretending to be sympathetic to their cause, but she is also a Titan, so she may be connecting with them at this moment too. She's very calculated, just as a person as a whole. So in this little conversation between Bert and Ymir, we see her explaining she doesn't remember eating their friend, Marcel. They also say that Aaron didn't seem to remember either. We'll get into what I think all of that means later. And also, she just comes across as not knowing a whole lot about being a Titan. Oh, and by the way, she is over 60 years old. What in the world? And also, they sprinkle that in right before Aaron passes out. Oh, yeah, Titans can live for a long time, and when they're in human form, look like they're 20. Or however old she is pretending to be, you know? And that'll come up later in this episode, too. The young look. I think that's important. Then we look back at the scouts. We see that they're pushing forward, etc. Very short clip of them pushing forward. So we get back to the Bert and Ernie crew. The four of them are now moving through the trees with their equipment. And Aaron's tied up and gagged, basically, so he can't do anything. But Ymir's holding on to Bert. And she gets this sense that Historia, or Christa, or whatever, is coming to save her. She says that she's stupid for doing so, but that is exactly what Historia/Christa is doing, is coming to save her. And I think that thought is what triggered what she did next. Because the next thing she did was she started attacking Bert and saying, I don't trust you. I want to see her now. And they explained to her that that is not going to happen because they wouldn't survive. They would be killed if they went back for Christa. And Ymir accepts this fact. And then at this moment, we look at Ymir's past. We see the slide, which we'll talk about in a minute, and we see a ton of stuff going on in her past. And it explains to us what she had been doing this whole time, those 60 years. And there's a lot that I want to dive into, but I'm going to save that part for the character analysis, because there's a lot of Ymir's past that we pick up on, and it explains why she is the way she is now. So then we go back to the scouts, and the scouts finally reach the forest, and we already see some of them being taken off of their horses and eaten by the Titans. So a few of them actually abandon their horses. They have someone else round them up, and they're on the search for Aaron. We see Mikasa, we see Armin, and they're both laser locked in on finding Aaron. But they see this glowing light, and Armin points us out that this glowing light, which is important, signifies when a person is shifting into a Titan. Again, that is super important. We'll come to that later. But shortly after that, we see Ymir in Titan form, so we assume that that light came from Ymir shifting in Titan form. And the scouts start talking to her like she's still another scout. The trust that they have in her is still there, because they saw her on the side of the humans in multiple occasions. But she's not saying anything. Armin points out that she's looking at everybody one by one, and nobody knows why. And then we hear Historia, Christa, coming up like, oh my gosh, Ymir, you're okay, you're safe, etc. And Ymir eats Historia. She eats her. Come to that later. Then we see Raynor change into the armored Titan like it's part of the plan, and then all of them flee the forest with the scouts on their tails. To be continued again. So yeah, a lot of Titan developments come up in this episode, and most of those developments are channeled through Ymir and her backstory, which we get a huge slice of in this episode. First off, as tradition, let's talk about the slide. The slide is called Ymir's hometown. Pretty straightforward. What it said on it was, it is not known where Ymir's hometown is located, however, its location is most certainly outside the confines of the wall. Was this helpful? No, not helpful. It's pretty vague because, well, everyone either lives inside or outside the walls. The fact that she lived outside the walls, okay, that's rare. But do we know where the town is? Do we know what's going on in the town? Do we even know the town's name? No. That'll probably just come up later. A lot of this stuff will come up later too, which I just want to know, man. I just want to know. Okay, favorite quote. This is the part where we go back into Ymir's past, and she had already lived as a Titan, etc. She wakes up and she eats Marcel, well, and blah blah blah. After she changes into a human and she's looking at the sky and just rejoicing in this sliver of luck that she had fallen into, in her mind she says, "From then on, I'd live honest with myself." As she's saying this, they do show clips of her sneaking around and stealing, but she's staying honest with herself. It did not say anything about other people, and she was fully aware of what she was doing at the time, obviously, which I guess is admirable, that she is being honest with who she is and knowing that she's stealing. And it's not like she stole an iPad or something, and I know iPads did not exist in this time, but I'm just saying that she actually took things that would be of use to her living and not just a toy or whatever. And they show her selling things to get money to buy food, not, I don't know, a yo-yo. I'm trying to figure out what they did for fun back then, because they didn't have a lot of fun in that time, because there are Titans everywhere. Never mind. So, for the character analysis, I only want to talk about Ymir. I know that there were other characters in this episode, but Ymir was the only one that really had a ton of interesting stuff happen to her. Okay, so let's look at the blurb that they had. It was more of a story about her past. So, we start off showing a few children. That's where the title of the episode comes from. And they see her in the lineup of children and say, "Here's a promising one," referring to her. This person who had picked her out of the lineup, I believe it's Pastor Nick, gives her the name Ymir. They also say that she has inherited the blood of the king and has been blessed with immortality. I'm not sure how she inherited this blood, or if she actually did. Probably not, because they didn't show any kind of ceremony. So now she is worshipped and crowds of people bow to her, and she lives like that. Is she really blessed with immortality at this point? Again, probably not. But as she says, you know, she had a bed, she had food, she didn't have to wheel and deal to live. And then one day, all of these soldiers come in with guns and they raid the place, basically. They're holding a gun in her face and they're asking her if she really is the next heir to the throne. And she was about to say no, but she said yes. And that didn't end well. Now here's an interesting part. They have a row of people on this wall. Which wall? I don't know. And one by one, you hear people saying, "No, no, no, don't do it." And you hear what I believe to be a stabbing motion, and then they are pushed off the wall. But that yellow light that I mentioned before, the yellow light happens when they hit the ground, quote unquote. I'm air quoting. You can't see it. And the same thing happened to Ymir. And she was a Titan. So we'll talk about that in the Titan developments. But Ymir is a Titan at that point. And she, I don't know, runs around. I don't know where she ends up exactly, but she lays on the ground and just kind of becomes the ground for what I assume to be 60 years. And then she wakes up. And she wakes up at an interesting time. We see Annie, Bert and Ernie, and their friend Marcel. This was the day that she ate Marcel. And what we see is Marcel pushing Rainer out of the way. Rainer would have been eaten if it weren't for this guy. And then Ymir picks Marcel up and she eats him. So that's when that day happened in the order of things. Ymir had literally just woken up. And then that night, she is back in human form. We'll talk about that moment later. So Ymir is at least 60-something years old. If not, I don't know how old she was when she first turned into a Titan. My guess would be 14, so about 75. So she's lived a long time. And then after her saying that she lived honestly with herself, she is hiding and hears the conversation about Christa becoming a cadet, and Ymir finds some similarities between her and Christa, or Historia, whatever. I don't even know which one to call her at this point, which I think explains more of why she has this fascination with Christa Historia, is that she sees similarities in them. It's not just a crush. She sees Christa being able to learn from her and her life experiences, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I've hinted at a lot of these. Let's go ahead and talk about the Titan developments that we've heard in this episode, and I want to go through these one by one. Okay, now, A, Titans live for a very, very long time and stay fit and young looking in human form. Yes, that has been confirmed. I had never really had a gay age of how old these Titans were, but this also makes me think, how old's Raynor? How old's Bert? How old's Annie? I don't know, but they could be up there, is what I'm saying. Also, from what Ymir had said about herself and about Eren in the conversation she had with Bert, Titan shifters black out when in Titan form. This is important. This helps us understand why Ymir ate Marcel. She blacked out, and the fact that both of them agree that Eren doesn't remember what he had done as a Titan either tells me that Ymir's not just making something up to sympathize with Bert. She is actually stating something that happens to multiple Titans, in that they all kind of black out. Well, I guess these ones black out when they're in Titan form. Is it for the entire time they're Titan form? It could be. Or it could even just be bits and pieces. Kind of like a brownout, maybe. Also, judging by who was at that campfire in the middle of nowhere 5 years ago when Marcel was being eaten, I assume Marcel was probably also a Titan shifter. What kind of Titan did he turn into? We will never know. Maybe. Then we also look at the backstory to Ymir and that moment where those people are being pushed off that wall in that yellow light that Armin makes a point to specifically point out in this episode. That wall turns people into Titans. Is it the wall? Is it that there's something on the ground when they hit that turns them into Titans? Is it whatever they stabbed them with before they pushed them over the wall that turned them into Titans? I don't know that, but there's something about the combination of things that happened to whoever was on that wall that when they landed or fell or whatever, they were Titans. So there's a lot going on here. Now, I also said I would get back to mentioning that Pastor Nick, I believe, was the one who had picked her out. Now, Pastor Nick's still around. And like I said, Ymir's probably 75 years old. That's just a rough guess. Pastor Nick was alive back then, 75 years ago. I think he's a Titan shifter. And you know, I think this whole wall cult is filled with Titan shifters. That might be why they're in the wall cult, is that they are Titan shifters themselves. Is that crazy to think that? You tell me. Let me know in the comments of wherever you're hearing this from, or if you want to message me directly, you can do that. And I'll tell you where at the end of the episode, like I always do. But let me know, what do you think of the age of the members of the wall cult? Isn't that weird? Alright, the next episode is chapter 36 and it's called Charge. And in the previews we see Ymir turning back to human form, talking to Christa, Historia, apologizing. That's what it looks like. I think that's what's going to happen. We also see the scouts, I believe, catching up to the Armored Titan, and we see the Armored Titan in a little bit of trouble. A lot of other Titans around him pulling him down. So will he survive? I don't know. My guess is yes, but it's just a guess. And we also hear them say that Erwin is going to implement a do or die strategy. And the episode's called Charge. So I assume this means that they're going to take all of what they got and they're going to charge at the Titans or whatever is in their way to save Eren and Ymir and Christa. Bert and Ernie, whatever. We can forget about them. I still call them Bert and Ernie just because it's easier, but doesn't mean I like them anymore. So outside the episode, I had hinted that there was some news in the Attack on Titan media world, and there is. So there are two things. First thing is that there's going to be a new Attack on Titan game coming out for the Nintendo 3DS. They already have a couple, I believe. This game is going to be called Attack on Titan 2 Future Coordinates, and it's supposed to launch in Japan this year, possibly. That is just the expectation. Will it? I don't know. There hasn't been a confirmed launch date. And I also don't know when it's going to be available in America, so we are going to have to wait even longer for it. But it's happening. Nintendo 3DS game, Attack on Titan 2 Future Coordinates. Also, the other news bit is that there are a few Attack on Titan filters available on an app called Snow, like the frozen stuff falls out of the sky. SNOW is the name of the app. I downloaded it to see what the filters were. It looks like there are 3 of them. Then in the news section of the filters. This app is basically a Snapchat wannabe, except it has way more filters to choose from, and they have 3 Attack on Titan filters. I tried them on myself. They seem to work really well, and they are fun, and I'm not even going to tell you what the filters are exactly. It's just that they are there, and you should get the app and check it out. I'm including the links to both the App Store and the Google Play Store where you can download the app, and that's going to be at the bottom of the description or of wherever you're hearing this from. Alright guys, that's been it for me. My name is Kimber. For a hell of a large selection of content, visit itsahellofaworld.com or follow them on their social media channels. You can also follow me personally on my Twitter at KimberBobimber. That's KimberBobimber. And that, my friends, has been episode 7 of Titan Talk. Thanks for listening and attack on!